we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen and move this block, and starting from this current slide. Hold on just a second. Whoops. And I think already I'm running into some technical difficulties. Hold on just a moment, please. All right. My mouse does not seem to be cooperating with me, guys. Bear with me. I want to do from current slide. Can you all see this?
Just the headline title.
The headline title?
Yeah, it says, there we go. Now,
resume strategies? Okay. Are you seeing just the one slide, or are you seeing all of them?
No, just seeing resume strategies applicable to all, and then
Perfect.
briefly your first bullet popped up.
All right. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. Sorry about that, guys. You know, I know that we're talking about an international job search, but I think one thing that Jane and I were finding whenever we were starting this conversation, and I can't see you guys, so I'm going to have to rely on people speaking up. You know, so especially Jane, if you want to chime in, just go ahead and say, Kelly, I've got something to say, because I can't see your face. Resume strategies applicable to all, because even whether you are doing a job search focused internationally or focused domestic or focused on an international company that is based domestic, there are some strategies that are applicable to all. So when Jane and I were having conversations really based on, you know, things that we're seeing whenever we're meeting with students and alumni with regard to resume development, these are kind of some topics that came to mind that we wanted to make sure that applicants were aware of. That first bullet point, placing the important information at the top. I think it's important to know that, you know, resumes are looked at. Notice I didn't say read, and we'll get to that in a minute. Resumes are looked at top to bottom, left to right. So you want to make sure that when you're thinking about, when you are looking at your resume, it's kind of that top left-hand corner where you want them, the employers, to be able to see information that you really want them to zero in on. It's important to know and remember that when an employer is looking at your resume, they already have an idea in mind of what it is that they are looking for. They know key words or key topics or key experience or key skills that they are looking to find. And the key is that you want them to be able to find that quickly and easy. It's important to keep consistent, standardized formatting. When I say the 10-second rule, referring back to what I was talking about before, it's important to remember that employers and organizations don't read resumes. They glance at them. And on average, you know, I used to say 30 seconds, and I honestly have shrunk that down over the years because I'm finding that when I'm talking to employers, they're glancing in mere seconds, again, with the idea that they know what it is that they're looking for in a resume. And so they have that in mind, and they're hoping to find that quickly. Your goal whenever you are submitting a resume is to get to the interview. And so keeping that consistent, standardized formatting lets them quickly look at your particular document to see the skills and qualifications that they're looking for. 0.5 to 1 inch margins, I would not go smaller than that. And 10 to 12 point font, I would not go smaller than that. It's important to remember that it's a human being most times who's going to be looking at your resume to determine whether or not to put you in the yes, no, or the maybe pile. Let's not make it any more difficult on their eyes than it needs to be. You know, a 0.5 to 1 inch margin is pretty standard around, that allows you to fit information on that 1 to 2 pages. Anything less than 10 point font gets pretty hard on the eyes, being honest with you. And so keeping those margins and that font size in mind whenever you're developing that standardized formatting. It's important to balance the white space. It's important to help distinguish categories or distinguish items of note on the resume. And so Using tools like bold or italics or all caps can certainly help you do that, but doing so sparingly. You know, through proper formatting and through consistency, bold and italics can help draw attention to something, but too much of something is not necessarily, in this case, a good thing. So keeping in mind how you're using those particular, you know, different styles to help draw attention to some aspects on the resume over others, but doing so sparingly, and also doing so consistently. If you decide to have one category title in all capital letters, then you will want to make sure that you have all of your category titles in all capital letters. And again, may seem like common sense types of, you know, types of topics, but you know, things that we find whenever we're talking to applicants about their resumes, you know, one little thing can make all the difference. I get this question a lot. Do I put my job descriptions in, you know, in paragraph form? Do I put it in bullet point form? Feedback from most employers is that bullet points are most appreciated, getting back to this aspect of them looking at your resumes in a very quick amount of time. The bullet points allow them to quickly take a look at your duties and responsibilities that you've listed under particular job titles and see the information quickly rather than having to read through a paragraph. And speaking of paragraph, everything that you learned in your English classes about complete sentences when you're doing a resume just goes out the window. You're going to be using short, fragmented action verbs, you're going to be using short sentence fragments, excuse me, starting with action verbs. Make sure that your action verbs match the correct dates of involvement or dates of employment. If you indicate that you have completed a particular job, then all of your action verbs for that job should be in past tense. And conversely, if you are still doing that particular job, then your action verbs will be in first person present tense. And use a variety of action verbs. Shameless plug for our resume guide in Handshake, which has a lot of good information in it to help you develop a resume, but has including an extensive list of action verbs that you can choose from. So ordered, arranged, assembled, classified, cataloged, categorized are all ways to say organized. There are many ways to say communicated. There are many ways to say helped. And so rather than repeating those same types of phrases, take advantage of using, you know, different verbs on your resume to convey a lot of different skills that you did. Avoid typos and grammar errors. When we talk to employers, and I've been working in career services for more years than I care to share, maybe 25 if I just shared it. And consistently, the number one thing that I hear from employers of what can make or break somebody's application is having typos or grammar errors in their resume. Spell check is great, but spell check isn't always your friend because spell check doesn't know the difference between their, T-H-E-I-R, and their, T-H-E-R-E. So you want to make sure that you pay attention and, you know, look for those typers and those grammar errors. The best way that you can do that, have your resume reviewed. Have a friend take a look at it. Have, you know, a professional take a look at it. And a professional could be, you know, a faculty member. It could be myself in career services. Jane has also offered very often to help review resumes with students and with applicants. It could be a colleague. It could be somebody who's working in the particular industry that you are interested in. That would be a fantastic opportunity to get feedback on your resume from somebody who's working in a field that you think that you might like to go into. But definitely have your resume reviewed before sending it out. Jane, anything that you wanted to add to this list of strategies?
Yeah, I agree with all of this. I think one of the things that's really sometimes hard, maybe for people at the entry level to understand, and even farther on up, is the importance of the white space
Yep.
and the point font. It's not about how much you cram into a resume. Uh, Less is more. And to have something that's nice and clean, because either it's going to go through an optical reader if it's a large organization, or it's going to be read by someone who's got a ton of other files to read. And so the cleaner you make it, the white space is really important. It makes a big difference in terms of, and there have been studies on this, it really makes a big difference in terms of someone will take longer to actually read and absorb what you have in there. Better chance more material will get read more carefully if you have that white space in there.
Mm-hmm.
And agree completely on the bullet points, action verbs, and always reviewing your resume. And keep in mind, there are people who pay big bucks to have people do for them what Kelly and your Center for Career Development colleagues will do for you, or what I'll do for you or other faculty and staff members. Take advantage of this. This is a huge Davidson benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I appreciate you saying that, Jane. You know, having somebody take a look at your resume, please do that. Set up an appointment, email your resume, you know, to me. Happy to take a look at it. You know, and I think Jane's point is, you know, is very much on spot on with respect to a lot of times what I'll tell, you know, job applicants is you want to think of the resume as your highlights. A lot of times what applicants will do is they'll list all of their particular experiences on a resume. And kind of the idea is like, I'm going to put up a wall. So you're not going to be able to see through that wall to see any reason why I may not be qualified for this particular position, because look at all of this amazing stuff that I've done. All that can convey to an employer is that you've done a lot of stuff, but there's too much here. I can't absorb it and I don't know where to begin. You know, so the idea of perhaps developing a master document for your resume, and then you're going to tailor and target that, you know, a resume to the specific position that you are applying for. So, okay. Resume tips particular to an international job search. You know, just some aspects to, you know, to pay attention to if you're, again, looking at an opportunity that's overseas, or perhaps looking at an opportunity with a very international focused organization. It's important to know the term CV. Just kind of curious if anybody would be willing to pipe in here. Who knows what CV stands for? There's no prize, but I'm just curious if somebody would be willing to share if they know what that stands for.
Give you a hint, it's Latin.
Yes.
I think I know what it stands for, but I don't know what it is. Oh, well, it's in the chat, curriculum vitae.
What does it stand for?
Well, someone already wrote it in the chat,
Okay.
but curriculum vitae.
Curriculum vitae. Okay, yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yes, curriculum vitae, that is what CV stands for. You know, when you're doing a search in the United States, we often refer to send in your resume. Whenever people are applying to positions within the United States, CV or curriculum vitae is traditionally geared towards positions that are focused in research or focused in academia. So you will oftentimes hear of people who are applying for research positions in, you know, in science, you know, quantitative or qualitative positions, or people who are applying for academia, professor, faculty positions. They're going to be sending in their CVs. The biggest difference between the two is, you know, a resume is very succinct and very brief, 1 page, perhaps 2 pages at most. Whereas if CV oftentimes goes into a lot more description, at least viewed from the domestic viewpoint. Internationally, CV and resume are very often interchanged. So whenever they are talking about sending in, you know, a CV in application for a particular position, that can indicate that they may be a little bit more flexible with the 1 page restriction. But if you're looking at CV examples domestically, you're going to find a lot of research, a lot of, you know, presentations, a lot of publications. Know that that's not necessarily transferable to the CV term for international, because oftentimes companies and organizations overseas will use that CV term interchangeably. It's important to showcase your cultural competencies. And again, that may sound very common sense with respect to listing language, you know, highlighting experience in diverse settings and understanding cultural nuances. But again, you want to be able to, for lack of a better comparison, quickly spell this out for employers to quickly view in your document. You know, if you are applying for a position where, you know, Spanish fluency is critical, let's have that Spanish fluency at the top of that resume so that they see that right away. Make sure that even if there's a position that you are applying for where there's not indication that having to have language is required, but if it's international and you do have language, you know, in addition to, you know, English, if that is your native language, then definitely listing that as, you know, a cultural competency. Highlighting study abroad experience, highlighting any experiences that you've had in diverse settings is what they're talking about when they refer to cultural competencies. To specific, any travel or education abroad experience that you've done, make sure that your resume can easily have that seen. You know, if you are looking at a particular geographic region and you've had the opportunity through study abroad, through, you know, through an internship, through mission work, wherever it would be, certainly being able to showcase that you've had that opportunity to do that experience. But on the flip side, don't underestimate domestic experience. At the end of the day, whether an employer is international or not, you need to be able to quickly convey to them on this document that you have the skills and qualifications that you're looking for. And so if you're applying for, you know, a fundraising type of position with a nonprofit international organization, and you've had fundraising experience through different organizations on campus, you want to be able to highlight that particular experience, regardless of where it was completed. To the next point of highlighting volunteer and community involvement. I know that Jane touched on this in our first session, especially if you're searching for opportunities with mission-driven organizations. It's critical to highlight these particular experiences. Suggestions that I'll often give to students is consider creating, or a goal can be to create on your resume, a category called relevant experience or career-related experience. Anything that you list in that particular category is experience that's related to the position to which you're using that resume for. And so relevant experience does not have to come from previous work experience. That's fantastic if it does. But if you have developed skills and qualifications through campus leadership, through community involvement, through an internship, through a fellowship, that's relevant experience that you definitely want to highlight. Final topic is learning about a country's resume culture. And if you don't know, ask. And what I mean by asking is doing research or talking to people working in organizations. And so this is if you have a particular, you know, geographic region in mind. Talking to people who work in organizations within that region, or talking to people familiar with the job search in that region to learn about a country's resume culture. This can be where international resumes can differ, and there are lots of different resources to talk about this. In some particular areas of the world, it is completely appropriate to attach a photo to the resume that you would be sending. In some parts of the world, it is completely appropriate to list your age, to list your marital status, to list your demographics with respect to race, gender, etc. And this can be tricky areas to navigate because this really kind of flies in the face of how a job search is done domestically, because many of the topics that we're talking about, not only should you not put it on a resume, it is not appropriate for an employer to be considering those topics or those aspects in your application for a particular position. it really depends on the region, and it really depends on the position that, you know, in the organization that you are applying to. And so that's why it's important to do research and to follow directions when applying for a particular position when it comes to a country's resume culture. Jane, I was curious, you know, given that you've worked with international organizations and international applicants, if you have aspects that you'd like to add to this.
Yeah, I will add, I mean, you know, so much of this, I've seen it when I've hired local staff overseas. And I actually, Kelly and I were talking about this in advance, and I put it out to a wide circle of people in my network. And they agreed with an article that Kelly shared with me showing about sometimes these different expectations. Even religion and religious affiliation can be asked. Those kinds of things are illegal in the United States, but they're not illegal elsewhere. And sometimes one of the harsh truths is that in many other countries where certain types of discrimination would be illegal in the United States, they are customary practice and totally legal in some other countries and regions. And that pretty much covers just about every country and region, including, you know, ones like, for instance, Europe. Which we tend to think of as very similar to the United States, but not necessarily always. So sometimes you have to think about what you feel comfortable with. And that may also kind of tell you about whether or not it's an organization where you feel like it's going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah, that's a good point, you know, to address that. So, okay. All right. So I thought we would, you know, kind of switch roles here, because I've been talking about, you know, like what recruiters look for, what employers look for, you know, putting a resume together. Are you guys seeing? Let's see. Okay. So this is a particular position that I have seen posted in Handshake. The organization is Habitat for Humanity International, the Davidson Impact Fellowship. And I just wanted us to take a minute just to look at the job description in terms of, you know, what the person who they're looking to hire for this particular position is going to be doing. And, you know, competencies that they're looking for. They don't actually give a lot of particular competencies, but, you know, team player. And then again, there's that, you know, navigate cultural differences and nuances. Just wanted you to take a few minutes just to, you know, kind of see job duties, responsibilities that they're looking for applicants who may be applying. Take another minute. This is actually a position that upcoming seniors may be interested in for a postgraduate fellowship. So if you are, reach out to me. Okay. So here we have a resume in application for this particular position. All right. I'd like some feedback about, and again, we can just kind of shout it out. We're going to, you know, not spend a ton of time on this, but I'd like some feedback about people's reactions to this resume. Any thoughts? Who wants to be the brave one to get us started?
Well, it's like over a page, so.
Okay. That could be okay though, right? Based on what we said. Might be okay for it to be 2 pages, but it's 2 pages. Other thoughts?
It would be, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like the spacing is a bit off in terms of like how the skills section looks, and it's kind of jumbled around a little bit. Like it could be cleaner in terms of formatting.
Okay, yeah, it could be cleaner.
That's what I was going to say. I think that bullet points, especially with this resume, would be really helpful.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
I was surprised that education was last. Normally I would put that closer to work experience.
Right. That's a very good point. This is a position that is an entry-level position, and and it is definitely recommended that, especially for entry-level positions, if you are not applying for a position where it's important to showcase multiple years of experience, this is a recent college graduate, education would come first. Any other? One last?
What do people think of that opening paragraph there, considering that she wants to apply for a internship with Habitat for Humanity International? I mean, is there anything in that first paragraph where she introduces herself that actually relates to kind of, would make someone reading just that opening paragraph think, ooh, I want to keep reading?
Well, it says sustainability and international development.
I think she should put the last sentence of her paragraph first, or at least closer to the beginning,
Fluent in Spanish?
or where it says sustainability and international development.
Okay, yeah, okay.
That's what they're looking for first.
Yeah. It kind of looks like she was writing that, and then she thought, oh, wait, I might also want to tell you I'm fluent in Spanish. And she kind of added that on there. And then Spanish is also actually then listed again in the skills section. Okay. Would this resume go in a yes, no, or maybe pile? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What do we think?
I'll tell you, I'd put it in the no to maybe pile, depending on the strength of other resumes.
Yep. Okay.
But
So
more
maybe.
likely the no pile.
Okay. Maybe if we were comparing it to this resume.
Ah. Automatically, I like the look of it without even having read it.
Okay.
So I would like some more margins and some more white space, but it's clean. It's cleaner.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot there.
There is a lot of information here. I think this person could have, could have put their, their resume to 2 pages. But comparing the two, when we're thinking about, just kind of that, Jane, as you said, that first reaction, she's got that highly motivated, looking to apply to project management skills, issues of global urban development. So I already have that connection.
Yeah, it's emphasizing the skills, the functions, without saying skills and functions.
Right. There's that relevant skills category. She's got education. I know somebody had mentioned that education is listed first, but then the skills, recognizing, the Spanish fluency. This position, if you recall, there's a lot of Excel work. So she talks about proficient with Microsoft Suite. She's got a related experience category. And I can see, and if we go to this next one where I've kind of highlighted, you can see where she's highlighting particular aspects. It starts with those, with highlighting that study abroad experience. It goes into the skills, the category itself, related experience. My eyes were automatically drawn to this particular section. Those bullet points, when it talks about collaborating, engaging with nonprofit leaders. If you recall, one of the competencies they were looking for was a team player. She talks about leading and managing and executing, different tasks and responsibilities. What's interesting about these 2 resumes, and I'm going to go back to this particular resume, the information is the same. The formatting is just different. What I will say about this particular resume is this was a template that was pulled off of, the internet. I Googled resume templates. So I think somebody was asking, it just doesn't look as clean. And you're right. This particular resume template was already pre-designed this way. The K at the top with the circle and the name being in that looks like 25-point font colored in turquoise, having to have that, objective statement at the beginning, which is really kind of repeating everything that's already said throughout the resume. The double lines, the work experience category coming first, the education experience category coming last. templates seem really helpful. And I know in our resume guide, we do have templates that are helpful. They've been designed by career service professionals that are more in tune with, what more traditional resume formats should be. I highly caution with respect to using templates that you can download from the internet, because oftentimes, number one, they are developed with not a clear purpose in mind of how they connect with employers. And number two, it's trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Like this particular template, for example, School for International Training, International Honors Program. After that, you have to select from a drop-down menu. What did you pursue? Was it high school? Was it associates, bachelor's, master's? Well, study abroad, you're not really pursuing any of those, so you only have the option to hit none. So you're trying to fit your experience into a pre-designed template that's not necessarily going to work for you. This particular resume is more of an example of how, okay, I can showcase particular experiences in different ways that really relate to this position that I'm applying for. Okay, I'm going to switch gears to talking about cover letters, and I want to leave time to, at the end for questions with regard to the resume, so definitely saving those. But I know that we want to talk about cover letters, because that's oftentimes what I'll hear from applicants is, I put together my resume and I worked really hard on that, and now I'm being asked to do this cover letter, and what on earth is a cover letter anyway? First of all, follow guidelines. Sometimes particular job applications, they will state, please send a cover letter indicating, and then they'll have, list what it is that they want you to indicate. So please, as always, follow instructions whenever you're applying for particular positions. But a cover letter, if you think about the resume is your highlights of your skills and qualifications for a position, a cover letter I like to think of as highlights of those highlights. So if you're looking at a particular position and you're saying, this is something that I know that I can do, your resume is going to really talk about overall skills-wise and experience-wise what mostly relates to that particular position. And then your cover letter, you're going to take a few of those experiences and do like a deeper dive. I like to think of a cover letter, it's short and sweet. It is maybe 4 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs usually at most. This is a short document that you send along with your resume. In that first paragraph, if you think about it, whenever you receive a letter from somebody or you open up an email, the first thing that you're asking yourself is, why is this person writing me? And so, keeping in mind, again, to Jane's point, that you may be sending it to somebody who is fielding applications for many different jobs or fielding applications for jobs and internships, let them know your purpose in sending your resume to them, the position that you're applying for, and how you learned about the role. Oftentimes, and we're going to be talking about, short plug in the next upcoming sessions, networking with people. Oftentimes, you may very well likely talk to somebody who says, oh, I'd like you to talk to, you may talk to Jane Zimmerman and she'll say, I'd like you to talk to Kelly Robinson about this particular position, or vice versa. And so when you are sending that cover letter to that particular person, mention the person's name who referred you. That will give them a frame of reference that they can have in mind. Wherever the position was posted, reference that source, and definitely if there's any identifying items such as a job number or an ID number, incredibly important, especially if you're applying to an organization that posts multiple positions. Don't make it harder for them to try and figure out why it is that you're writing to them. The second and possibly the third paragraph of the cover letter, this is like the meat of the letter that you're writing. This is where you have you and you have the organization, or you have the role, and you are trying to say to that particular person reading that letter why you are the perfect match. Again, keeping in mind, your goal is to get an interview. We're not looking for you to get a job from this. You're looking to just tweak their interest enough that they're like, you know what, on paper, this person looks pretty good. I want to bring them in for an interview to get to know them better. So some people will ask me, well, how do I write that? How do I determine how I'm qualified for for this particular position? How do I say that to them? I say go back and review that job posting. Highlight the descriptions in that job posting that made you say, like, I can do this. And, you know, for those of us in the audience who have had work experience, you can probably nod that you've had that experience where you're reading a particular job description and you're getting excited, or, you know, students who have read internship descriptions and you're saying like, this sounds interesting. I could do this. Oh my gosh, I've done something similar to this. Those are the types of things that you're going to then go back to, number one, reference on the resume, but number two, do a deeper dive in this cover letter. Getting to this next point of mentioning specifically relevant roles, tasks, or skills. The example that I like to use for this is actually myself. So in my career service experience, I've had a wide variety of experience over those 20 plus years. You know, I have, you know, I've worked individually with students, I've done programming, I have done, you know, working with faculty, et cetera, et cetera. So one particular position that I was applying to actually prior to coming to Davidson, that particular position emphasized one-on-one career counseling. And so there wasn't going to be presentations, there wasn't going to be collaboration with faculty, et cetera. My resume for that particular position definitely listed those experiences that I had had, but in my cover letter, I did a deeper dive talking about my specific experience doing one-on-one counseling with students. And so that really helped them initially see, because that was a job duty that they were definitely looking for. This is where I've had, you know, the opportunity to gain these skills that you're seeking. Research the organization, and then research the department or the, you know, the company, looking for a wide variety of resources. The job posting, again, very oftentimes they're going to mention information about the company's website. Social media, finding them on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. That's where they're going to post the most relevant information. Highlighting items that made you say, I want to work for this particular company. So the focus is on, you know, tying yourself and connecting yourself to the role and the organization, and outlining why it's of interest to you. Final paragraph, that's where you reiterate your interest, list your contact information again, and thank them in advance for their consideration. So this is a short, sweet, you know, cover letter, you know, very kind of succinct and to the point, yet it's very much more kind of personal and making that additional deep dive and connection. Moving on to some pitfalls when I think about cover letters, and, you know, cover letters that I've critiqued and I've helped students develop. So again, that's something that, you know, I'd be happy to work with you on. Some cover letter pitfalls oftentimes that I see is drawing attention to or apologizing for lack of experience. Sometimes applicants will, you know, they'll be applying for a particular position, and perhaps it's saying that they are looking for, you know, a certain level of experience in a particular job duty, and this person doesn't have that. And they'll apply anyway and use the cover letter as an opportunity to sort of apologize for that. The purpose of the cover letter is to make the connection to the particular position, rather than using that as an opportunity to maybe draw attention to or apologize for something skills-wise that you don't necessarily possess. Writing a tell-all book. Again, getting back to when I was talking about the resume and the importance of, you know, highlighting, and as Jane was talking about, the importance of white space. The cover letter is not meant to be a repeat of the resume going into a lot of detail about each particular position to try and, you know, bulletproof your application, so to speak, that there's no reason why you couldn't want to consider me, because look at everything that I've done. And then the cover letter, I'm going to tell you everything about all these positions that I've done. It needs to be specific and, you know, targeted to the particular position. Getting to making, you know, not making specific connections between your background and the job. If there are particular experiences that you have done that you're referencing on your resume, if they are looking for, again, getting back to my example of fundraising experience, and you mention on your resume that you were in charge of helping to raise funds for a particular eating house on campus, the cover letter could be an opportunity where you can go into a deeper dive about that. Talk about, you know, what it was that you did and your role to be involved in that fundraising. So it's making the particular connections. Cookie cutter cover letter. Say that 5 times fast. we have all done it, and I certainly understand your background is not going to change, and it certainly makes sense that if you're applying for like-minded types of positions, that aspects of your cover letter are going to be similar in, you know, with respect to different applications. But make sure that your cover letter says something about that particular connection that you have with the job or with the organization. The opportunity to work for your organization is one that I would enjoy immensely. I could be saying that about fill in the blank, Habitat for Humanity. I could be saying that about, you know, Barings Financial. I could be saying that about any particular organization. So try as best as you can, you know, to tailor that particular cover letter. This is a big one, focusing on what the position will do for you instead of what you bring to the role. It is important to remember that you are trying to convince this particular organization to bring you in for an interview to show that you have something to offer them. And so while job searching and professional development, there is this aspect of, you know, how is this role going to benefit me in terms of what I'm hoping to do professionally? Cover letter is not the time to be necessarily talking about that. You want to focus on what you're going to bring to the organization, because again, that's the framework that they have in mind when they're considering different applications. And then finally, can you tell that I'm going to talk about it again? Not proofreading. Make sure, especially when you are actively searching, you're going to be, you know, churning out cover letter after cover letter after cover letter. Make sure that your cover letter, you know, spell check, typos, errors, and then also that it reads and that it flows. A hint that was given to me that I've always passed along is read it backwards. Because sometimes when we start to write, you know, a cover letter kind of like a story, we start to, you know, without even realizing it, we're skimming over, we're reading, you know, chunks of a paragraph at one time instead of reading for typos. And when you are looking at something backwards, you're forced to look at each particular word to try and find a typo. So, Jane, did you have other ideas or things you wanted to emphasize with regard to cover letters? I know you and I have talked a lot about this. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. For a
That's
while,
okay.
my Google speaker thought that Kelly was giving her commands, so I had to mute myself. But anyhow, Kelly and I were talking about this. I have a couple of hacks, and also I've been sitting in, I both sit in as a panelist on career things, and also I've been sitting in more as a participant so that, you know, I can work with Kelly to, and you all to help better advise you. Also, in one of my past incarnations, I dealt with like about a quarter of the paper that was going to the Secretary of State every single day. So I became a real stickler for format, proofreading, etc. Like I could pick things out really quickly, and I can shorten almost anything into like the length of a tweet. Mm-hmm. But one of the things for cover letters, I think they're immensely important. Don't ever let anyone tell you that they are not, especially at any level, but including at the entry level. A couple of hacks I've learned for that middle part, you can actually kind of copy paste into that body, into that meat, those, you know, 2 to 3 paragraphs in the middle there, the position description. Now, you're not going to write all 12 or 14 points in the qualifications and job description, but you're going to kind of figure out there, what is it that they're really looking for, and how do I, what I call crosswalk or match that to my resume, to my experience, to my skill sets. And I've literally done that, and to make sure that I'm kind of picking up on their language and their words, because that just is going to make it much easier for them to identify that, ooh, this is someone I want to interview and possibly someone I really want to hire, or I'm putting this person in the yes pile for sure. When Kelly talks about doing your research, for example, let's say I have a position open in the Dean Rusk International Studies program, and you write me a cover letter that says, "Dear Sir / Madam." That tells me you didn't even Google to learn what my name is. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times on a position description, I'll tell you who the position reports to. If you can, sometimes it's not clear who the actual individual is. But if you can figure out through, you know, a quick Google search who the specific individual is that you'd be reporting to, put in their name and then double check their title. Do they have a PhD? Then put in doctor. If they don't, then Ms. or Mr. so kind of find a way to kind of automatically make that personal connection. It's a really great way to show that you've done your research. And I think there was a student earlier when we were talking about resumes who really picked up on, you know, the good truth of journalism. Don't bury your lead. That is, be upfront about what your top skills are that match what they're looking for, because it's not about you, it's about the job. And you know, any organization is carving out precious resources because they have a need and they need someone to take care of that and to be able to do the job. And you really want to make it clear to them as easily as possible that you're the person who's the best fit. And often it is a matter of fit. Let me give you one other hack, and I learned this from a panel I was on earlier this summer. I thought it was really a clever technique. Someone suggested taking the position description and putting it into a word cloud and see what are the key words that automatically come up. And then kind of take your resume or your standard template of a cover letter, and you can start with a resume, put that into a word cloud, see how they match. And sometimes they echo the language that the organization is using. For instance, I was in a group yesterday that was talking about career transitions, something you can worry about later on in life. But for instance, someone who was going from the nonprofit world where we talk about monitoring and evaluation, and she wants to move into the private sector, where they do the same thing, but they call it performance management. So she switched around her language to echo that of the job that she was seeking. On proofreading, like I said, reading it backwards I think is brilliant. Reading it out loud, that's what I used to make people do when they worked for me. And I just did not want to see anything with, you know, that was sloppy. Grammatical errors and typos can creep in there no matter how many people proofread it sometimes. But you can tell when it's an inadvertent slip or a minor slip versus someone who just hasn't done their homework. But all this advice, again, and the reason why Kelly and I keep stating it is because at every level, and remember, I coach a lot of people who are my level, fairly senior and executive, all the way on down to, you know, interns, students, etc. And we often see the same kind of things tripping people up at every different level. You know, when I was director for Western Europe, people would come and say, I really love Paris. And it's like, everybody loves Paris. But you're not telling me about what you're going to do for this job. I don't care that you love Paris.
Right. You're not going to be at a cafe every day. So. Okay. All right. So in conclusion, because I know we're coming up on time, just some concluding thoughts, and I want to, you know, leave some time for some specific questions if people have them. With regard to a resume, develop that master resume and then target and tailor your application materials to specific roles. You should have multiple versions of your resume going. Follow application directions. I know Jane and I are big advocates of cover letters, but if an application specifically says no cover letters, or if an application specifically says no phone calls, follow those directions. Don't dismiss your experience. I've heard many students say like, well, I don't think I could apply to that because they're looking for 1 to 2 years of experience. Experience can come from any place. It doesn't mean that they're just looking for 1 to 2 years of work experience. So think about what your experiences have been, you know, both during your time at Davidson, on campus and off campus. I'll bet you can find some places where you've developed the skills that they're looking for. Proofread, proofread, proofread. Have somebody proofread it. You know, just have someone take a look at your resume and your cover letter. I often say, like, give somebody your resume and then take it away for, you know, you have them look at it for maybe give them 20 seconds, let's be generous, and then take it away and ask them, what do they remember about your resume? If they're remembering the things that you want them to remember, then that means that you are on the right track. Okay. All right. I am going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, we have some good questions in the chat.
7. All right. Leaving early, curriculum vitae, that's it. Is there a picture where the K is? Why the K? The K because it just automatically populated it. You know, so that particular template, since my first name began with Kelly, it populated it with a K. Ever appropriate to use bullet points in a cover letter? That's a good question. I've seen people use bullet points. I think it can be, it can be useful as long as it's, you know, as long as it doesn't lose kind of like that personal aspect of it. And as long as it's just not coming across as just a repeat of the bullet points in your resume. I don't know, Jane, if you have different thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I would say if it's something where you can relate a lot of information quickly that is relevant to the job description, that's not a bad way to do it. So I'd be open to it, but I kind of almost leave it to your muse a little bit. But keep in mind, you've also got all these resources here at Davidson. You can get feedback from the Center for Career Development and Kelly, me, or other faculty and staff.
How important are follow-ups? Vary. When is an appropriate time to follow up after applying to a job? So follow-up is definitely important. Whenever you have sent in an application to a particular position, we're going to get to this in the next couple of weeks, but when you apply to a position, before you send in your application, but then additionally after you send in your application, I am snooping around looking to see who do I know who works at that particular organization, alumni, contacts, like who is it that I could possibly have a conversation with at that particular organization? Because that can get the process going of having a conversation, of perhaps finding out more about the organization. That person perhaps would be willing to get in touch with the department who you have applied to talk about the conversation that they have. Like all sorts of great stories could develop from that. But getting back to the importance of if you have a conversation, they may be able to then provide you with information about, okay, they're going to be beginning the hope to start selecting candidates within the next couple of weeks. I think if you don't hear anything, I think it's appropriate, depending again on how large the organization is, but I usually recommend perhaps within a couple of weeks. Or if you can look at I should have started with this. If you look at the particular job posting and it gives an application deadline, then perhaps giving a couple of weeks after that to inquire, I'm just checking on the status of this particular position in the application to it. Any thoughts about that, Jane?
Yeah, we'll get more into the networking things, but especially if you know someone in the organization or who has a relationship with someone in the organization, they can often kind of either make a recommendation on your behalf or also kind of even do a little bit of an inquiry. In fact, I recommended several students for an internship this summer. Keep in mind, with COVID, I always say everything takes twice the energy and twice the time to get half as much done. And I was actually going to follow up just because I want to know if the organization was really going to hire an intern or not. And they did just about the time I was going to follow up, but they were about 5 weeks late just because everybody's had such a difficult time adapting. So don't feel badly, especially this summer, if you applied and didn't hear back from people. That said, I think that everybody who's interviewed is owed an answer. Some organizations will respond, others don't, and shame on them.
Yeah, and I would agree with both of that. Appropriate to put your picture on a resume, Shaheen? That's a great question. I mean, I feel that that's one, getting back to, to Jane's point, here in the States, you should never be putting your photo on a resume. When you are applying internationally, that can come into play with, perhaps with aspects of the resume, that there are certain regions in certain countries where culture, it is appropriate to put your picture on the resume. I think getting back to Jane's point, I'll try to paraphrase it, but she said it very eloquently that, that's like a photo should not, somebody's photogenic presentation should not come into play when determining if that person is a good fit for a particular position, which is why in the States it's not necessary or appropriate to have it on there. So I think it gets back to, is that a company or an organization that you are comfortable working with if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable in providing your photograph and application? Did I paraphrase that correctly, Jane? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would also add that the first thing they'll do is take your name, put it in Google, and up will come your LinkedIn profile, and they'll see your photo anyhow.
Yeah.
And
You're right.
That customarily, no, you don't do that on a resume here. It would feel a little icky, to be honest. But overseas, in many countries and regions, it's totally normal. I will say one thing, which I really like here on this Zoom. I see two people who have profile photos up. Kimberly and Rashawn have great photos up. You do want to have, and this will kind of segue into our next session next week about LinkedIn. You do want to have a nice headshot. I see Kimberly and Rashawn have great smiles. Boy, we're human beings. We pick up on things like smiles, nice backgrounds. You know, Kimberly's is very tight and very clear. Rashawn's tells me, oh my gosh, DC, this guy's a policy wonk. I want to talk more to him if I'm looking, if I'm going to interview for people for jobs like that.
Yeah.
So think about also what kind of, you can do that, put a picture profile in your LinkedIn. Make sure you have that. And also here on Zoom, because you're going to be interviewing on Zoom.
Yeah.
By the way, my background here, I just Googled world map Zoom background and this came up. And one of the things I like about it, no borders, nothing here that kind of gets too geopolitical. You know, it's just blue and white. It's clean, it's simple, and it's non-controversial.
Love it. And I did notice that, and that's very cool. Shaheen, you had also asked about when to start excluding high school achievements. I usually say after your first year in college. And I would write that in pencil because everybody's experience is different. But usually perhaps after your first year in college, you've had an opportunity to start to get involved on campus or off campus. Your resume is a living document, so it's going to continue to grow. And so, you know, I've talked to some students who in their sophomore year of college, like they still have some high school experiences on their resume, but the high school entry and the education, that's gone. I've talked to other students who maybe like first year, they just didn't have a chance, you know, didn't really get, you know, as involved on campus, but they're looking to do that. You know, then perhaps their high school experience can still stay on, but I would still say that the education section is going to be gone. By this, you know, by your sophomore year, you want to have shown that you started to evolve into this next, you know, this current role in your life, whether on campus or off campus, and those high school experiences will start to fade. But there's always somebody who comes back to say, but, you know, I founded this club in high school and it was, you know, nationally recognized and it's related to my career interests. Then perhaps that's a reason to keep it on for a resume that you're applying to for a position that relates to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm working with the Charlotte Sister Cities Initiative, and there's a student from the Country Day High School who's creating our website. That's something he'll want to keep talking about, and he'll also want to put it on his LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And I see Alec asks a really good question here
Yes.
about, should we be mentioning on our resume cover letter about working remote? And the answer is yes, there are ways to get at that. This is where you all have a generational advantage because there's always going to be this perception that younger people are more tech savvy. You can talk about how, you know, you quickly adapted or to suddenly go to working offline, you know, that you had an internship or that you volunteered or did study online. Maybe you did things like you developed a website or used some digital tools. There are all sorts of ways to talk about that. And I think that's going to be really important because we're going to be in this for the long haul. And I think it's going to be a fundamental shift. A lot of people aren't going to be going back to offices because productivity has been pretty high despite all the disruption. And I see there's another one question. How many years after undergrad do you exclude leadership in student organizations? I would say, sorry, Kelly, I should let you.
No, I'd be kind of curious what you know, I mean, it really, I think, depends on the particular position that you are applying for. Perhaps 1 to 2 years out, again, with a living document that's going to start to, you know, to evolve. But again, it depends on a person's particular circumstances. As you know, I serve in my role as pre-law advisor. If I'm talking to a student who graduated, you know, a year or two ago, and had some great internship and leadership experience, and in their time since then, you know, they've been working in a restaurant or a server position to make money to help pay for their, you know, for their law school tuition. They're going to have all of that on there. And that leadership is still something that they're probably going to be talking about. So it's appropriate to have it. Again, I think it kind of varies. I don't know what your thoughts are, Jane, if you have a time limit that you recommend.
I would say look at the specific skill. So for example, I see a lot of student organizations raising money. Now, let's say you raise something like, you know, $1,600 through, you know, a sale. That actually, you know, through some kind of or I think there's even more that's raised through like Davidson Refugee Support through the hats and mittens and things. Quantify that. How much money did you raise? How many, say, resettled refugees produced handicrafts for that sale? So quantify those skills. If you created a website, put in a hyperlink. if any kind of fundraising, digital marketing communications, and especially monitoring and evaluation or performance management, use numbers to quantify the impact. You may think, oh, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. But you're highlighting certain skills and things that you've done that will really resonate and will make you stand out versus the competition. But quantify, quantify, quantify where you can.
Right. And so again, it gets back to, it's not necessarily where you developed that experience in those skills, but what you did in the skills that you developed. So, anything else? For the good of the order. Okay. All right. It was great seeing you guys. I hope that you will join us next Tuesday when we'll be talking about LinkedIn, and then the following Thursday when we'll be doing a little bit more deep dive. I think that's my phrase of the day, deep dive into networking. Again, I will be sending out the recording of this session. And if you have any follow-up questions, certainly reach out to Jane or myself. So it was good to see everybody. So I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you.
Next
Bye-bye.
week. Thanks, Kelly.